Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up tonight, we're rethinking what we thought we knew about Neanderthals. Dr. Jerry Bergman walks us through new findings that paint a picture of complex, intelligent human beings, very different from the evolutionary stereotypes. Then Nate Loper joins us to highlight the recent discovery of soft-bodied Cambrian fossils in the Grand Canyon and explain how their delicate preservation aligns with a catastrophic global flood rather than slow, gradual processes. But first, Armageddon. For some, this word may invoke fear, mystery, and maybe even dread. But for those of us that read and study the Bible, this location is known to be the spot of the last battle in the book of Revelation. But what is Armageddon exactly? Well, first, the name Armageddon is the modern biblical location of Tel Megiddo in Israel. And with all these layers of civilizations, of course, it is to be expected that there will be incredible archaeological finds in this area, finds that should prove the truth of biblical accounts. Well, most recently, a historical find backed up details regarding King Josiah. Now remember that King Josiah was one of the greatest and one of the last kings in the line of David. He walked in David's ways. He brought the nation to revival. He died in a battle with Pharaoh, but he can still be an inspiration for us today. And according to this discovery, as quoted in the New York Post on April 1st, 2025, archaeologists believe that they have uncovered evidence of an ancient biblical battle. The artifacts, which mostly consist of Egyptian pottery, were found during a recent excavation of the ancient city of Megiddo in northern Israel. The site is said to contain over 30 layers of various settlements dating back from the Copper Age to World War I. Tel Megiddo was the location where Josiah, the king of Judah, famously fought the Battle of Megiddo in 609 BC. The Jewish leader was defeated and killed by the army of the Egyptian Pharaoh Necho II. Now, this material context offers tangible archaeological backing for the biblical confrontation between Josiah and Necho. First, this provides physical evidence aligning with the biblical account of Josiah's confrontation and death at Megiddo. And second, it confirms an Egyptian military presence, once speculative, but now backed by archaeological proof. But believe it or not, there is a yet greater archaeological find that also came to light in Megiddo very recently. It sent shockwaves throughout the world. It's being called by many the greatest archaeological discovery since the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that basically puts it in a category of its own because the Dead Sea Scrolls established the modern understanding of the history of the Bible. Let's watch.
The second or third day of the excavation, they realized that this is something different.
There were three descriptions.
What makes the big sensation, the mentioning of Christ in a public building, the first time ever.
Discovered in 2024, the Mosaic Church's discovery further adds to our understanding of the early church. This Megiddo Mosaic was a floor mosaic discovered in Megiddo, Israel, and now stands as a foundational archaeological witness to early Christianity, a literal floor that connects us to a congregation worshiping God, Jesus Christ, in a shared space near a Roman military base more than 1,800 years ago. Let's dive a bit deeper on this incredible discovery. Watch this.
Well, and let's talk about that because this Megiddo Mosaic is said to be, outside of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the greatest archaeological discovery that we currently have, which, I mean, that is a bold statement.
That's a very big statement.
And the reason that they're saying this is because this mosaic dates to around the year 230, and it has this high Christological statement on it. So, Wes, why don't you unpack that for us a bit? Like, what is being said here that's so significant?
Yeah, so it has the earliest inscription of Jesus being called God outside of the New Testament. One of the, I think, shocking factors of something like this is that you do find an inscriptional archaeological writing on the floor, which is what this is, of a building, which is arguably, I mean, I think this is being described as the earliest church. On the floor, it has this inscription given to this individual, a keptos, and it says, in honor of God, Jesus Christ. And so this is not just, a passing statement, especially in the society that would have seen and understood who the God and and gods were, it's not a small statement to associate Jesus with something like that title.
So here we have not one, but two discoveries in the Valley of Megiddo in approximately the last year alone. I mean, what an incredible time to be alive. I don't know about you, but it kind of feels like the Bible can just come alive. These so-called stories from the Bible, well, actually, they're affirmed in real time by the discoveries that are being unveiled in the present day. And it's sending us a message that we should have known all along. You can trust the Bible. But what else does the Bible say about Megiddo? Well, perhaps there's a reason that God is drawing our attention to this ancient valley, maybe even drawing our attention in this day and age. Well, how about this from Revelation chapter 16? For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watches, and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. Yes, there is a great battle that we see described in Revelation that happens in the Valley of Megiddo. There's nothing boring about archaeology. There is nothing boring about the Bible. It was true then, it is true now, and it's teaching us even today through modern discoveries. That's what we are here to help reveal to you every week. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Just outside Nashville, the Wonder Center and Science Museum, with a top 10 planetarium, kids' hands-on activities, the teen favorite 1 million volt musical Tesla show. It's worlds of fun for the entire family. Experience the wonder. Explore the science. Inspire curiosity. Embark on adventure. The Wonder Center and Science Museum. The birds of the air, they were created by God in the beginning, but they are so diverse right now. He is being handed this magnificent creature.
This bird is designed. He is chock full of design. This doesn't just happen. He'll fly over your head and he'll land and you can't hear a thing.
Is that right?
It's incredible. God thought of everything when he made them.
On Wonders Without Number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. Welcome back to the report. Now it's time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. This week's submission comes from Reddit, where Fossil Hog asks, "Do creationists have an explanation for the success of modern petroleum exploration and production? We use fossils throughout the geological record to correlate rock strata and identify ancient environments that are beneficial to identifying petroleum reservoirs. The best fossils are called index fossils. Typically, they existed over large geographic areas and evolved/changed rapidly. Without using this knowledge, we'd just be putting random holes in the ground looking for oil, and that would get pretty expensive pretty quickly. Well, fossil hog, yes, it's true. We find certain fossils near the strata where we find oil, but it is not true that there is evidence that these fossils evolved or changed rapidly. What it means is that certain types of creatures lived in or near areas that produce oil in abundance. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, that's literally how ecosystems work. Also, as those who study the Bible, we actually have even greater explanatory power for the geological layers that sandwich below and above the oil and the coal, because not only do those layers sometimes traverse entire countries, sometimes multiple countries, pointing to a global scale catastrophe, but the fossils that are found in those layers, they're overwhelmingly marine fossils, pointing to vast watery environments matching the historical record that's found in the Bible. I'd invite you to come with me on a paleontology dig sometime to the Niobrara in Kansas, and I'll teach you more about these things. Now, we love connecting with our viewers, so remember to keep those questions coming. You can share them with us on social media, or you can email comments at GenesisScienceNetwork.com. And now it's time for the Kids Corner. Have you ever stopped to think about how you hear sound? Well, whether it's your favorite song, a barking dog, or even somebody calling your name. All of those sounds, well, they're picked up by something smaller than our hand. We call it our ear. And it all starts with sound waves. So these are tiny changes in the air caused by something moving, like clapping hands or a barking dog or your favorite music. Well, those waves travel into your outer ear down a little tunnel called the ear canal. And then they hit your eardrum, a super thin piece of skin, basically, that begins to vibrate back and forth. Well, behind the eardrum, there are the three smallest bones in your body. They're nicknamed the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And those bones, they move when the eardrum moves, and they make the sound vibrations even stronger. So from there, the vibrations travel into a tiny spiral-shaped organ called the cochlea, deep inside the inner ear. So the cochlea is filled with fluid and lined with thousands of tiny hair-like cells. Well, as the sound reaches the cochlea, the fluid actually moves and those hair cells sway back and forth. Well, those movements send tiny electrical signals through your auditory nerve to your brain, which then figures out exactly what you're hearing. It's deciphering and interpreting those waves and all of that movement. So without even thinking, your brain is telling you, hey, well, that's a drum beating, or, well, wait, somebody's calling my name. I just realized that. But your ears can pick up quiet whispers, they can pick up buzzing bees, or they can go all the way up to a loud rock concert. And they do it all in less than a second. The Bible says in Proverbs 20:12, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. Now that's a powerful reminder that God designed our ears with purpose and precision. From the outer ear to the inner ear, every piece fits together just right. And it's one more reason that we can definitively say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Up next, a new study is challenging how we think about Neanderthals, suggesting that they were skilled toolmakers with a level of precision that rivals early humans. Dr. Jerry Bergman joins us to explore what this means for the so-called 8-man narrative after the break. Limestone, we see it all around the world, but what is it exactly and how did it get here?
But let's delve a little bit into limestone. This was found by our good friend John Mackay, our mutual friend John Mackay, a few years back, right? He was driving through the Peak District and he shouted, "Stop!" And he said, "I've seen limestone." And the driver was like, "We're in the middle of the Peak District, it's all limestone around here." No, I found some special limestone.
On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back. For years, Neanderthals have been cast as primitive, unsophisticated, barely human sometimes, but a growing number of studies are flipping that script. The latest, a new scientific analysis suggests that Neanderthal toolmakers were far more advanced than once believed, selecting raw materials with intention on shaping them with remarkable precision. Now, that kind of craftsmanship raises a question. Were Neanderthals really some evolutionary halfway point, or just another fully human culture with unique challenges? To help us examine the evidence and what it means for human history, we're joined by Dr. Jerry Bergman, a science historian and prolific author whose research spans anthropology, theology, and the philosophical assumptions that shape modern science. Let's start with the big picture. Dr. Bergman, this new study says Neanderthals made tools using deliberate technique and planning. Why is that such a big deal, and how does it contrast with how they're usually portrayed?
The feeling has been they take a rock and hit another rock and kind of randomly end up with a tool. But no, they had to get the right angle, they had to get the right rock, they had to get the right strike. The complex issue, which people in this country, by the way, have tried to imitate it, and they found it's not easy at all to do. But on the other hand, Neanderthals, well, had lots of practice, so they're able to successfully do it. So that's it.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. We have to ask the question, well, where did Neanderthals fall within human history? And we'll get to that in a moment. But this wasn't, again, random chipping away at rocks. The researchers say that Neanderthals chose their material carefully, that they followed specific steps to try to get these sharp tools. And that level of craftsmanship, it means that they probably were very intelligent, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and this is only one of many, many finds where Neanderthals have moved from a primitive ape to a intelligent, sorry, my throat's giving out, intelligently modern man.
Yeah, absolutely. But that, again, I noticed even in this report, striking results showed Neanderthal crafters were sharper than we thought. Play on words there. But they go over and over again. They say their ability to finely hone stone tools is evidence of intelligence. Then they go to making assumptions. We'll go back 200,000, 400,000 years when Neanderthal ancestors were kicking about. So they're putting them way back in the past and then saying, but wow, they had impressive intelligence. There's a limit to how much credit that we've given them, and it seems to be way too low, that they were burying their dead, using fire, wearing jewelry, living in communities. I mean, at what point should we stop calling these people pre-human and start recognizing them as fully human, but just with limited resources?
That point is very well taken. Now, the fact is that they are fully human, and one example of that is I had my DNA evaluated by 23andMe, and guess what? I found I was 3% Neanderthal. And that really is not surprising because of where I'm from. Yeah. I'm from the area, actually, where the first Neanderthals were discovered in Germany. And so therefore, it is not that amazing. And so therefore, we've joined the family, so to speak, Neanderthals have. And I should mention these tools were very important. They didn't have knives. They didn't have the tools that we have to do the work that we do. But so the main way they did much of the work, like scraping tissue off of skin so they could make clothes, was these tools they made by chipping certain kinds of rock. And so it was very important. And I can mention the problem is they can't explain something. One way of dealing with it is just add more time. Well, therefore, they've been working on this for 10,000 years. That solves the problem. But more time does not always solve the problem.
Nope, it's not a magical ingredient or a wand that we can just wave over every issue. And not to be biased on the other perspective, but look, I believe what the Bible says, and I believe that there was intelligence from the very beginning, that the first man was just as intelligent, maybe even had more mental capacity than we do today. So from a biblical perspective, how do you fit these Neanderthals within the history of the world?
Well, they were simply one of many people groups. There are many people groups, and we know of several. Neanderthals were probably more important because they were larger. They had larger areas that they lived in, and therefore they survive for a longer period of time than other people groups.
Okay, now some of their technology, again, feels primitive to us today, but if they lived shortly after the flood, flourishing sort of in this Ice Age type period that may have been precipitated from conditions of the flood, well then, does that explain how they were a civilization starting anew after a ruined world, and therefore they didn't have all of the same technological advances as a few generations down the road or a few generations before them?
I think that explains it quite well. But of course, as we learn more and more about the Neanderthals, we realize that they had many of important technological advances. One interesting example I'm aware of is they're able to make musical instruments that were judged by musicians today as very high quality. So we're not talking about crude instruments in this case. We're talking about very refined instruments which could produce incredibly beautiful music. And so as time goes on, my guess is we'll learn more and more about them and we'll realize how much they did.
Well, Dr. Bergman, it seems to me like we should be taking away from all of these studies within the scientific community, within historical research, that we never see any report come out that says, oh, well, these people that we thought were, you know, a pre-human ancestor were less intelligent. We never see reports coming out, oh, this was less engineered, or this was a horrible design, or whatever within biology. What we see is that every new report that comes out is pointing to design, engineering, intelligence, biblical history being correct, and so much more. So, Jerry, I want to thank you for being on the program and thank you for your important work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And if you're interested in exploring the fossil evidence for human origins and how it aligns with Scripture, I don't want you to miss this book, Apes and Ancestors. It was actually co-authored by Dr. Jerry Bergman, Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins, Peter Line, and Daniel Biddle. Most of those are friends and colleagues of mine. They did an incredible job on this book. It's a resource that challenges the evolutionary claims about so-called ape men. I'm putting that in air quotes. And it presents a compelling case for the biblical view of human history. You can find it at the Creation Superstore. Now, at this point, it's time to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back with a whole lot more on the Genesis Science Report. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists, and on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. We are back, and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first viewer voices submission tonight comes from Janice on YouTube. She says, "Wow, information galore, something for everyone. I hope many more people hear of your ministry." Thank you, Janice. We appreciate you sharing those YouTube videos. We appreciate you sharing the other ministry outreaches with everybody you know. It is a lot of information. We're talking about, I think it's over 600 videos on YouTube at this point, and a lot of information on pretty much every topic you can imagine when it comes to the creation versus evolution debate, when it comes to apologetics and biblical history. Now, our second testimonial comes from Michelle, who had this to say after visiting the Wonder Center. "We Googled things to do in the area, and this was on the list. We didn't buy tickets ahead of time, but also were there on a Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Easy to get tickets for our group of 6. The kids enjoyed the activities, the shows, the panning for gemstones, and the scavenger hunt. It took us about 3 hours to do it all, enjoyable for all ages." Thank you so much, Michelle. The panning for gemstones is a rather new addition at the Wonder Center and Science Museum. The scavenger hunt, of course, encourages young people to get involved, and we're really excited to hear that it's showing up on Things to Do in the Nashville area because this is a destination for those who are traveling from out of town. So thanks again for visiting. And if you've been impacted by the work that this ministry is doing, I want to hear from you. Just connect with us on social media or email comments at GenesisScienceNetwork.com. Next, we turn our attention to the power source inside of you. On this week's Genesis Science Minute, we explore how your body runs like basically a walking power plant, all by design. Let's take a look right now. Did you know that the human body generates enough electricity to power a small light bulb? It's true. Every time you think or move, electrical signals zip through your brain at lightning speeds, making you a walking power plant. It's incredible how God literally fills people with a natural electrical energy to power their bodies. It reminds me of Philippians 4:13. "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." You may not have a way to convert it, but just like our body's electrical power seems limitless, with God's strength, we can tackle anything that comes our way. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. That's davidrives.com. David, RIVES.com.
And now it's time for this week's Ministry Report. We just released a powerful new episode of Changing the Narrative featuring our good friend, Dr. Brad Harrod, a speaker, author, and scientist who's been boldly defending biblical truth for decades. Now, in our conversation, we looked back At the Scopes monkey trial, now about 100 years behind us, and we unpacked the deep cultural consequences 100 years ago that continue to shape our classrooms and even our churches to this day. We also explored how some of the same false ideas from 1925, well, they're actually still being taught despite everything we now know from modern science. So this was one of our most eye-opening episodes to date, especially when we got into the darker side of Darwin's legacy, from eugenics to academic bias, and how those ideas still creep into our educational system. Let's go to a short clip from that interview.
The thing was huge. People don't realize this was the first court deal that was on radio.
Okay.
Telegraph, I mean, it was, they blew it up in a huge way. It originally was supposed to just be about a teacher who had taught the wrong thing.
Okay.
It went from that to being basically a worldview battle between folks who believe in God, the Bible, Genesis, versus humanism, naturalism, atheism.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was kind of blown up to become more than its original intent. But isn't that often the case? If you get a foot in the door and then you start to question these things, then the next thing you know, there are elements lining up that actually can affect society, and they can affect society in only a few generations.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about how far the pendulum has swung from this trial, which was primarily supposed to be about, hey, you've got a teacher who is not supposed to be teaching that humans evolved from ape-like creatures, to today where you can't question evolution. I mean, we've literally gone way over here to the point where,
And this was one of the ACLU's first big major cases, and the whole thing was basically a setup. But this is what we continue to fight every week on this program and through our other ministry outreaches. If you want to hear the full conversation, you can search for Changing the Narrative with David Rives on YouTube, or head straight to our channel, David Rives Ministries, and look for the episodes with Dr. Brad Harrod. Now, the prayers and generosity of you, our viewer, continues to make all of this possible. Your monthly support helps ensure that we can share not only the wonders of God's creation with individuals all over the globe, but things like the lies that were spread at the Scopes monkey trial, things like the lies in the textbooks that are still going on today in public schools around the globe. Now, we invite you to partner with us in ministry by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can visit our website, or you can call 931-212-7990 to donate and learn more about this work. Next, we dive into a realm that science still struggles to explain: our dreams. On this week's Heavens Declare, we ask, well, are dreams just random neurons firing off, or is there meaning behind the mystery of dreams? Well, let's take a look right now. Throughout history, dreams have captivated human imagination and curiosity. Ancient civilizations, from the Egyptians to the Greeks, regarded dreams as both a natural aspect of life and potential messages from the divine. The earliest recorded dream dates back to around 2500 BC, marking the beginning of humanity's exploration of the subconscious. Later, the Greek philosopher Aristotle contemplated the nature of dreams, suggesting maybe they reflect waking life. Well, this early inquiry laid the groundwork for centuries of intrigue surrounding our human mind. Fast forward to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when Sigmund Freud proposed that dreams serve as a window into the unconscious, revealing hidden desires and unresolved conflicts. His seminal work, The Interpretation of Dreams, emphasized the significance of symbols and the dreamer's personal history, establishing a psychological framework that continues to resonate today. But guess what other idea persists today? Evolution. Interestingly, Freud's framework has roots in evolutionary theory. Now, you may be surprised to learn that Charles Darwin's work influenced Freud significantly. Freud referenced Darwin over 20 times in his writings. By considering dreams through Freud's lens, we may conclude that they're limited to carnal symbols, simply stemming from our psyche. Well, Darwin believed primal forces drive behavior and influence natural selection. And Freud, he adopted this concept, arguing that the unconscious mind is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past and our basic instincts. This connection invites a lot of scrutiny. What does modern science actually reveal about dreams? Well, recent sleep studies indicate that dreams play a crucial role in our overall well-being and mental health. They serve as a remarkable mechanism for processing emotions, experiences, and memories, aiding in the consolidation of learning and even problem solving, rather than being a deep chasm of an ever-evolving psyche, as Freud suggested. Dreams during REM sleep show how the brain is designed to actively organize information, which actually could enhance creativity and inspire new ideas in you. Yet there remains an air of mystery surrounding the dream world. While dreaming seems to be a universal human experience, not everybody remembers their dreams. Nevertheless, our understanding of dreams points towards intentional design rather than random chance shaped by evolution. Historically, many figures have credited dreams and dream interpretations to a creator. Biblical accounts feature Joseph and Daniel, while more modern examples include Albert Einstein, who dreamed key components of the theory of relativity, and Niels Bohr, who attributed the structure of atoms to a dream. And Otto Loewi famously woke from a dream with an experiment that would lead to a Nobel Prize-winning discovery, only to forget it until the dream returned. So what does all of this mean? Well, the complexity of the human brain, including our capacity to dream, suggests an incredibly creative God who has bestowed upon humanity a veil of mystery within the mind. Sometimes, dreams might provide clarity that feels like a message from heaven. And other times, well, we might just be processing last night's pizza. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. And dreams are probably just one of God's little mysteries that holds a purpose and maybe gives us a little entertainment, because I guess some of them can be a bit strange. Well, coming up, it sounds like something from a sci-fi novel. A startup claims that it could actually turn mercury into gold using nuclear fusion. Dr. Artem Oganov joins us to separate fact from fiction next on the Genesis Science Report. Tune in to the Genesis Science Network Knowledge Block as you learn real, cutting-edge science, not evolutionary theories and agendas. Whether you're in junior or senior high, a homeschooler, or an adult looking for higher education, we bring you a fresh perspective each weekday. Our goal is to equip you with another block to build and strengthen your faith, giving you solid evidence. Join us each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. I want to thank you for supporting GSN this year. Your support is helping us send this broadcast to millions of households around the globe. You know, in a society where the theories of Darwinian evolution are bombarding our youth via schools and universities and through peer pressure, we need to saturate the airwaves with the truth of real biblical science, and you are making this happen. Your one-time, monthly, or generous end-of-year tax-deductible love gift keeps this network streaming 24/7 at no cost to our viewers. Thank you for your support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Is there a biblical view of animal rights?
We've actually got a report that was in one of our British newspapers a little while back. Don't kill mosquitoes, let them take blood donation. Now here's a great example of being futile in your thinking, right?
Right.
At what point should we be looking after animals? At what point should we be treating animals as if they were humans? So it's a really popular topic.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. This next story sounds something straight out of science fiction, or even maybe an alchemist dream. A U.S. startup recently claimed that it could make gold from mercury using nuclear fusion technology. The announcement has sparked headlines, questions, and plenty of skepticism. But is this real science, or is it pseudoscience dressed up in modern language? Joining us now is Dr. Artem Oganov, Distinguished Professor at Skoltech in Russia, Fellow of the American Physical Society and the Royal Society of Chemistry, and one of the most highly cited scientists in his field. Dr. Oganov has authored over 300 scientific publications and has held professorships in the U.S., Europe, China, and Russia. He's a leading voice in materials science and nuclear research. Dr. Oganov, welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It is great to meet you. Let's start with this startup's bold claim. From your perspective, are these claims of turning mercury into gold using nuclear fusion, is it scientifically sound?
Well, when I first saw the news, I was shocked to the core, and I thought that these are some crazy people saying nonsense. But then when you actually read what they're claiming, it makes perfect sense.
Interesting. So for our viewers, could you explain the process of a nuclear reaction and how it differs from like a chemical reaction, such as the ones that we're familiar with in everyday life?
Yeah, you know, the alchemists dreamt about transforming lead or mercury into gold, and they hoped to achieve that by normal chemical reactions. But normal chemical reactions have energies many orders of magnitude, like millions of times smaller than the energies involved in nuclear reactions. And nuclear reactions are exactly what is needed to transmute one element into the other. So alchemists were not wrong per se, they just chose the wrong way to achieve a legitimate goal. To create a nuclear reaction, you need to bombard atoms, the nuclei more specifically, with elementary particles, let's say with protons or neutrons or alpha particles or ions of other type. So when they collide, a new nucleus is born.
I catch you.
For example, in this specific case, and this process has been known for a while, nuclear fusion is a well-known way to create new chemical elements. This is how all these new chemical elements are discovered. And by the way, here in Russia, we have the latest discovered elements and a very fruitful field of research. If you look at the periodic table, all the latest elements are born here in Russia, and precisely using fusion, nuclear fusion. But the trouble is that you cannot create sizable amounts of elements in this way here normally. You can make I don't know, 100 atoms maybe.
Yeah.
This weighs nothing. This weighs nothing. You know, in a chunk of gold that you can hold in your hand, there are billions of billions of atoms. That's a different story. It's not 100 atoms. You cannot even see it, even with a microscope, 100 atoms. So these people propose a different way. Well, it is based on nuclear fusion, but rather tricky one. So what they start with is that, okay, people are dreaming about harnessing energy of nuclear fusion, fusion reactors, which would produce electricity. But fusion reactors have several problems. One of them is that to enable nuclear fusion, you need deuterium and tritium. These are isotopes of hydrogen. One deuterium has one proton and one neutron. and tritium has 1 proton and 2 neutrons. And tritium is extremely expensive. You can only make it artificially. It doesn't virtually exist in nature. And 1 gram of tritium costs $30,000 US. And you need to burn this stuff in the reactor. How do you get it? Where do you get it from? That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that when nuclear fusion happens in these tokamaks, tokamak is this toroidal confinement camera where this fusion happens. When this fusion reaction happens, it produces fast neutrons.
Okay.
They fly at huge speed and don't stand on their way. You'll be in trouble. You need to do something with these neutrons. And what these guys say, they say, okay, you have fast neutrons traveling at high energy, at very high speed. Let's put mercury on their way. They will bump into mercury nuclei. Then mercury nucleus will get 1 more neutron. This isotope turns out to be unstable.
Okay.
It emits 2 neutrons. It's called N2N process. So on input you have 1 neutron, but in the output you have 2.
Okay.
And these neutrons will then clash with other mercury atoms. Yeah. So it's kind of chain reaction, if you wish. Okay, then mercury atom loses 2 neutrons, emits them out, and transforms into another isotope of mercury, which is also unstable.
Okay.
And undergoes the so-called beta decay, when from the nucleus you emit an electron. And this shifts you to another isotope, and this turns out to be isotope of gold.
Ah, interesting.
Stable 1.
Okay.
So this way, you utilize the neutrons, which you have to do something with. You utilize them to transform mercury into gold, into a stable isotope of gold, but then you still get a lot of neutrons. You need to somehow maybe stop them, maybe utilize them, or at least decrease their energy.
Yeah.
So people propose to put the lithium, and when lithium absorbs this neutron, it then splits, producing tritium, solving our problem number 1. And then this tritium goes and gets burned into the tokamak, in the reactor. So there are different shells. One shell is where the actual reaction happens, and then there are these shells with mercury and shell with lithium. That's somewhat simplifying, in a nutshell, what these guys are doing, what they are simulating, because this work is not yet implemented in any kind of experiment. This is their computer simulation, and their absolutely genius imagination.
Yeah.
I applaud these people, and I think this really has a chance.
It's exciting.
And they calculated that annually they can produce 3 tons of gold, which is like $300 million from almost nothing.
Well, it's an exciting possibility. The practicality is yet to be demonstrated, but I appreciate you breaking this down for us. And it kind of reminds us that we can be creative and we can come up with all of these new ideas, but at the same time, we're still working with all of the elements around us to try to manipulate things. And it's so satisfying to see just how far technology can be pushed. I want to tell you, we really appreciate you being on the program today and for sharing your research, Dr. Organoff.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Pleasure to meet you.
With more than 300 peer-reviewed publications, Dr. Organoff's contributions to crystallography, computational materials, and nuclear design are internationally recognized, and his team's ongoing work is available at uspex-team.org, where you can explore current projects and published research. It's a valuable resource for anyone curious about this frontier of atomic scale discovery, from nuclear fusion that we've been talking about to the potential of creating gold from mercury. It's exciting to see what's going on within the scientific world. Some people dig in the rocks of the Grand Canyon and unearth discoveries that challenge evolutionary narratives. Sometimes we find fossils, sometimes we find ichnofossils or trace fossils, but this idea of millions of years of slow, gradual Darwinian evolution is being challenged by nearly every new discovery in the canyon. Well, a team recently found exquisitely preserved Cambrian fossils. We're talking about soft-bodied creatures that really shouldn't survive long at all, and yet they've been found intact in a region known as the Bright Angel Formation. Secular scientists interpret this as a window into a 500 million year old ecosystem. But is there another explanation, one that actually fits the evidence and honors the authority of Scripture? Joining us to explore this discovery is Nate Loper, Executive Director of Canyon Ministries. Nate, welcome to the program.
David, it is great to be back with you again.
It is great to have you on. Let's begin with the discovery itself. And again, I've got two different reports, including some of your thoughts on the issue. But what was actually found in the Bright Angel Formation, and why is it being called such a significant fossil find?
So in the Bright Angel Formation, what they found were basically small, very small pieces of fossils that they were able to actually extract from the rock by kind of dissolving the rock with hydrofluoric acid and then filtering out the remains and finding, small pieces of fossils and perhaps even what some of these creatures were even eating, perhaps. And so it's kind of a fascinating find there.
Yeah, absolutely. But when we talk about soft tissue preservation, or let's just say a worm, and I know sometimes it's only burrows and sometimes there's a lot of degradation, but how does the preservation of some of these tiny little organisms challenge the idea that these things were just buried slowly over millions of years and then sat around for 500 million years waiting for us to find them?
Well, that is a great question. And what we do find oftentimes, we find these kind of, trace fossils or worm burrows and things like that. And often what we're looking at are some of those features that don't seem to add up if it were the case of millions and millions of years in slow, gradual deposition. And one of those things that we see in the Bright Angel Formation, the shale, we find lots and lots of worm tubes and burrows. And I've seen those hundreds and hundreds of different ones throughout the Grand Canyon over the years. And that does present a problem, I believe, to the evolutionary model, because some of these soft tissues that they're now finding and some of these other things that are much more fragile and even very delicate, that doesn't quite match what we typically see in the oceans today, where the ocean is a really good recycler of things that die. And for something to be, preserved when it was a soft tissue, it has to be buried rapidly, away from scavengers, away from the effects of, decay and things like that. And so what we're finding are fascinating examples of what appears to be rapid burial.
Okay, so you've got of course, you've got the supergroup layers and on top of some of the granites, but then in most of the canyon, you've got this layer of Tapete sandstone, right? And then one layer above that, you have this Bright Angel shale. And normally we think of shale being deposited from a watery environment. And we also know that most of the sandstone formations, even by secular reasoning, are deposited by watery environments. There's really only one in question that they say might be Aeolian. But you describe these as early flood deposits. Again, they seem to be water lane deposits, but can you explain why these layers fit so well?
Well, that first layer you talked about, that Tapete sandstone that sits directly underneath the Bright Angel Formation, David, that is a layer that we find across the entire continent of the United States, and it's found all the way across North Africa. I've seen it over in Egypt. We also have that going into parts of Asia. So we're talking about the same sedimentary material deposited across multiple continents. And here's the fascinating thing. Geologists agree, whether they are creationists or non-creationists, they agree that Tapete sandstone was deposited by a fast-moving water event. And the physical evidence is found within the rocks, within the sorted grains that we see, within the crossbeds, and within the you might say, worldwide distribution of these layers. And so that's a great evidence of the beginning of the flood, because directly underneath that, right where that boundary at the bottom of the Tapete sandstone is, we find a massive scouring event, again, worldwide, where sedimentary layers have been scoured away, even down to crystalline basement rock that's been exposed that sits directly underneath that depite sandstone. It's almost as if we had a worldwide catastrophic fast-moving water event. And David, it's a lot quicker and easier to simply say a flood, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Nate. And this scouring event that you're talking about, a lot of people call this the Great Unconformity because you've got these supposedly Cambrian level rocks where you're seeing all of these creatures fully formed, fully functional. You're seeing Cambrian level creatures, but you're also seeing tiny little details, like in this report, with small worms and microorganisms and even trilobite trails preserved in some of these layers. And then the very layer underneath that is supposed to be over 1 billion years old, right? And it looks like it was simply scoured, and then all of a sudden you have these mass burial layers full of creatures. So the flood seems to provide a better explanation. Why do they come up with 500 million years for these layers, Nate?
Well, that's a great question, and there's a few different reasons for that, but one of those reasons is kind of the assumption that it's taken 500 million years, perhaps, for time, for slow, gradual, evolving of life on our planet. For example, where we have the Tepete sandstone and the majority of the rock in the Grand Canyon, directly underneath that Tepete sandstone, we get to the crystalline basement rock. And so what you said is exactly right. The secular interpretation is that we have 1.2 billion years of missing time in between there. And I think that's the fascinating thing that we see. Not only do we see, you might say, an explosion of erosion between that basement rock and the Tepete sandstone, but right there when we get to that Tepetes, what we find is an explosion within the fossil record. And what you mentioned, exactly right, we find that Cambrian explosion, or Cambrian explosion of life, they call it. Which really, if you understand it, is not an explosion where life suddenly evolved and bloomed into existence. When we look at it from a global flood perspective, this is not, David, an explosion of life. This is an explosion of death. Because what we see hand in hand, the same place where we happen to find massive worldwide erosion, we find massive worldwide death and burial with this fossil record.
Wow. Nate Loper, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, David.
For those who want to dive deeper, check out Nate's article, Grand Canyon Fossil Discovery, a snapshot of life before the flood, at canyonministries.org. And if you want to see this evidence for yourself, I encourage you to contact Canyon Ministries. Nate and his team lead these rim tours and river trips through Grand Canyon National Park from a biblical perspective, and it's really an unforgettable way to experience one of the world's greatest wonders while learning how it testifies to the truth of God's Word. That is it for us today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. Until next week, keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.